I am dead, was personally pushed into the zombie horde by Wang Yin and bitten to death. When I opened my eyes again, time had actually returned to a year before the outbreak of the zombie virus. Wang Yin looked down at me and said, "Lin Chichi, can you roll away a bit?" Annoying. I raised the corner of my mouth slightly. "I remember, you are the richest person in Case City." He frowned and said, "What?" I glanced at the gray sky. "In less than a year, you will kneel down and beg me, go block them. You go feed the zombies, hurry up and go." "Sister, you don't have any special abilities. What good is it to escape? You wouldn't be that selfish, would you?" A force came at me from the side, and the next second I was thrown into the horde of zombies. They tore at my body, blood oozing from my limbs, and this pain amplified my senses. "Run fast, she won't be able to stop you for long." Wang Yin was pulling Lin Can to run, with fragments of my clothes still hanging from his hand. I reached out my hand to grab. A zombie jumped up and bit off my arm, and my fingers were still moving in his mouth. "No." I suddenly opened my eyes, my body drenched in sweat, like a drowning person who suddenly got air, greedily gasping for it. I looked around and instinctively touched my arm. Everything is so peaceful, as if it were really just a dream. "What are you screaming for? Trying to scare me to death so early in the morning?" Lin Can was wearing a nightgown, her skin whiter than snow, but the fierce expression on her face ruined this purity. I hate her, but now seeing her scold me, I actually feel a sense of relief in my heart. I laughed, pointing at her shoulders shaking with laughter, becoming even more unrestrained. She left the room. "Are you crazy?" I tilted my head to look at the time on the calendar, July 15th, 2021. There is still 1 year until the outbreak of the zombie virus. The person in the mirror looks charming. In the past, I lived cautiously, afraid of being conspicuous, always keeping my head down and being submissive, which wasted this appearance. Lin Can doesn't allow me to wear skirts. My clothes are either what she doesn't want or plus-size women's clothing, which makes me look like a barrel. I bent my fingers and flicked my silly reflection in the mirror, and the next second I froze, because the mirror in front of me disappeared into thin air. A conjecture quickly sprang to mind, and I reached out. The mirror that had originally disappeared had indeed returned to its original position. I tore off the pajamas I was wearing, took out a dress from the bottom of the box and changed into it, and put on some makeup at the same time. Stepping out of the room, Lin Can was having breakfast, and an egg rolled to my feet. "Who told you to dress like that? Who are you trying to seduce? Just like your mother, you're both cheap." I curled my lips, bent down to pick up the egg and tossed it back, followed by the crisp sound of eggshell colliding with the porcelain bowl. "Treasure the resources you have now. It may not be long before this egg is worth more than your life." My first stop was Night City, the largest nightclub in Case City. No ticket is needed here. A pretty face is the best admission ticket. 10 cups of night fragrance. I was twirling a lighter I bought for 1 yuan at the convenience store in my hand and gently tapped the bar counter. The bartender was stunned for a second, and I slightly raised the corner of my lips. "Don't worry, someone will pay the bill." 10 cups of night fragrance are neatly arranged on the bar. The ultimate colors mixed with the rich aroma of wine make one unable to resist sinking in at just a glance. Ding ding ding. I slid the lighter along the rim of the cup, pressed my thumb lightly, and a small flame sprang up, awakening the dormant elements in the glass. The flame is fleeting, and the brilliant fireworks and brief warmth create the true night-blooming jasmine. A gasp came from around me, but I was staring straight at the lazy man leaning against the pillar on the second floor with a faint smile. He is the target I have today. Shou Teng. After the outbreak of the zombie virus, he established the first alliance in just 5 months by his own efforts, providing shelter for many displaced people, becoming a god in a chaotic world. I have never seen him, because I died before I saw him. That's right. The reason I and Lin Can were attacked is that we were preparing to go to him and were surrounded on the way. In order to win the favor of this person, Lin Can forced me to find out many of his interests. For example, the scent of this night-blooming jasmine being scorched by flames. For example, he is the owner of a shooting training center, with a strong background, wealthy and powerful, and these are what I need the most right now. Sure enough, I was soon taken alone to the second floor. Shou Ting nestled in the sofa, his voice magnetic and weary. You are looking for me. It is an affirmative tone. Yes. What is it? Borrow money, Shou Ting. He paused for a second and smiled. Borrowing money from the bank. I'm a good person. I don't lend at high interest, little sister. I glanced at the black-clad bodyguards surrounding the room, and finally stopped on him. Oh, good man. I'm also a good person. Since we're all of the same kind, how about making a deal? He rested his chin on his hand, a smile in his eyes. Go on. If you knew in advance what would happen a year later, what would you do? Of course, it's about being prepared and preventing problems. He chuckled lightly. Are you telling me a story? It is a fact that what I want to trade with you is this. A year from now, something will happen that will change the world and even all of humanity. I emphasized each word. You are a businessman, you should know that this deal is not a loss. Shou Ting's half-face was shrouded in shadow, his eyes fixed intently on me. I appear calm on the surface, but inside I'm actually anxious. After all, my understanding of him in my past life came only from snippets in the apocalypse, so I can't be sure that the future king will easily believe my tall tales just because of a few words, but there's no way around it. 1 year is too short, there is still a lot I need to do. And with Shou Ting's help, everything will become simple. After a while, his lazy voice broke the silence. All right, go ahead. I breathed a sigh of relief and looked at the people around me. He waved his hand, and soon there were only the two of us left in the box. I placed my phone in front of him, and my card number is on it. There is no such thing as a free lunch. I need money. Shou Ting curled his lips. You also said that merchants don't make unprofitable deals. Aren't you going to show some sincerity first? I lowered my gaze. All right, a year from now, an unprecedented virus will break out, and all living beings in the world will be involved in this mutation. I know the exact time it will happen and what preparations should be made beforehand. He paused for a moment, tilting his head to indicate that I should continue. I put the phone back again. Give me the money. He chuckled and transferred 2,000 to me. I frowned slightly. What's wrong? Do you think it's too little? Then go ahead and say more. And once you're done, I'll pay you the remaining amount. Don't you believe what I'm saying? Shou Ting propped his chin on his hand. His magnetic and pleasant voice filled the private room. Let's not even talk about how ridiculous the things that will happen a year later are. Just take that virus for example. Do you know how advanced medical technology is now? All living beings will mutate. Are you kidding? I held my phone tightly and slowly began to speak under his mocking gaze. Shou Ting, a native of City F. His grandfather was a former chairman of the military commission. His father is the current head of a military region. He has participated in classified missions 4 times, and after retiring from the military, he went into business and is now the founder of a company. He enjoys shooting and combat, with fierce techniques. Every time he kills an enemy, his preferred lethal target is the head, and his most handy weapon is a dagger, which is engraved with 10 thorny vines. His most proficient gun. Enough, I didn't say another word. And his expression stiffened. He squinted his eyes and said, You are investigating me. This is indeed something I specifically collected, but that was in my previous life. At that time, Shou Ting was a hero in the hearts of the people across the country, and even the children on the street could say a few words about his deeds and habits. But now it's different. Those who know these things are either dead or locked away in some unknown place, out of sight of the sun. I shrugged and said honestly, I don't have that ability. This will be known to everyone a year later. He stared at me for a long time, suppressing his laziness. Go on. I want 1 million. Yes, on July 15th next year, at 3 o'clock in the morning, there will be a global power outage. Temperatures will reach a peak, followed by a sudden drop in temperature, and the air will become thin. It is recommended that you prepare oxygen tanks and down jackets. After the whole process, some humans will turn into zombies. Which means that the apocalypse will come on July 15th. Shou Ting's brows were tightly furrowed, and I felt that if I said one more word, he would blow my head off. I know this sounds ridiculous, but the fact is, my second purpose for coming to see you today is to ask you to teach me shooting and fighting, with the cost deducted from the 1 million you just mentioned. He didn't say a word, and suddenly a bodyguard appeared behind me and patted my shoulder. "Miss, please step outside." I sighed, no longer entangled, as exhausting his patience wouldn't do me any good. As I reached the door, I turned my head away. "What I just said is true, having taken so much money from you. Let me remind you once again." At the corner of the first floor, a person blocked my way. "Lin Chi-Chi." I hesitated and looked up. Seeing this face made my pupils constrict, and the images of being devoured flooded my mind. I seemed to smell the taste of my own blood. I took a step back with a pale face. "Did you not hear me calling you?" Wang Yin stepped closer. I slightly raised my head, my eyes filled with crimson. He was taken aback and stopped. "What kind of look is that?" I turned to leave, and he took a step to block my way. I said, "Can you stop bothering me? Even if you chase me here, I won't change my mind. Can you keep a distance from me and can in the future? It's really annoying," I sneered. "I remember you always saying that the Wang family is aristocratic. And that everyone in your family is upper class. How, in less than a year, you will kneel down and beg me?" Wang Yin stared at me for a while, laughing so hard that tears came out. Then a waiter came over and patted him on the shoulder. "Sir, please do not make loud noises in public. Please go outside." Wang Yin looked around at the people dancing, singing, playing cards, and the noisy scene. As soon as he opened his mouth, he was covered by several security guards and taken out. I turned around, and Zhou Teng was lazily leaning against the stair railing. "Seeing how confident you were just now, I actually started to believe what you said a little." I raised an eyebrow. "Cooperate." He tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'm looking forward to it." After leaving Zhou Teng, I headed straight to the largest mall in K City, which contains all the daily necessities. "Hello, may I ask if your manager is available?" The salespeople here usually don't follow the customers. But when I suddenly called out, it startled them awake. "What do you want to see the manager for?" "I need rice, flour, oil, and sugar." "Go by yourself in that area, 10 tons each." 10 minutes later, the manager stood in front of me to discuss matters related to the collaboration. I rented a lot of warehouses with Zhou Ting's money, and every week I scheduled trucks to transport food, water, and all kinds of supplies there. Within a week, the warehouses were filled up. And I would let the workers rest for a day before heading to these locations. That day, after the mirror disappeared out of nowhere, I realized that my abilities from my previous life had actually been reborn with me. Lin Cancan thought I had no special abilities, but in fact, I do, and it's a very rare spatial ability. But to protect myself, I haven't told anyone. I used my supernatural ability to collect everything in the warehouse. The food and the space won't spoil. Whatever is put in can be taken out unchanged, and even the temperature won't change. Just like that, round and round, I slowly stockpiled food for the impending apocalypse, and it's thanks to Zhou Ting's wealth that I can endure such turmoil. Even if spatial abilities are powerful, they are still limited. I can only do my best to stockpile supplies, but to survive in the apocalypse, this is far from enough. Because I have experienced it once, I deeply understand the importance of food. So I spent a week immersed in the library buying many books on agricultural cultivation, and I also consulted experienced agricultural seniors. I must establish my own agricultural kingdom in the apocalypse. I chose this location in Yunjin. Yuntown is my home. Before I turned 7, my mother and I lived in this small town until she passed away. And then I was taken away by the butler sent by the Lin family. I will never forget the first time Lin Dong came to see me. Dislike, loathe, disgust. I am like a stain in his life, a painful past. I call him Dad, and he coldly told me, "From now on, call me Mr. Lin." I was stunned for a second and gave him a sweet smile. "Okay, Mr. Lin." After turning around, the smile on my face completely vanished, and my eyes were filled with indifference. Lin Donglai picked me up to return to the Lin family because he wanted to run for a promotion and was afraid that his opponent would find out about me. So he took precautions in advance, but I want to stay forever. I can't forget the way my mother desperately tried to call him when she was diagnosed with exhaustion in the hospital, pleading to hear him say something again. But at that time Lin Donglai was playing ball with his father-in-law and couldn't even be bothered to answer her last call. A good husband is just a man who is indifferent and ungrateful. So I want to stay. just when Lin Dong was about to be promoted. He accidentally exposed himself to the media when Lin Cancan was showing off, willingly playing the role of the scapegoat, and then just happened to be seen by classmates and friends while their family was enjoying a harmonious time. A slip of the hand broke a vase, causing Mrs. Lin to discover a USB drive containing her husband's romantic affairs. I cautiously live in the shadows, ruining Lin Donglai's promotion, tarnishing Lin Cancan's reputation, and causing Madam Lin and Lin Donglai to drift apart. This seemingly glorious home is actually rotten and stinking inside, but the only thing I didn't expect was that after being humble for so long, I really thought I only deserved to survive in the gutter. So when I met Wang Yin, I threw myself at him without hesitation, trampling my own dignity into the mud time and again, forgetting my original pride. It was only when I died that I understood I didn't like him. I was just infatuated with the warmth of that coat under the sunlight after the rain that covered my bruised skin and the torn pieces of my clothes. Little girl, it's time to go. I blinked and came to my senses. Thank you, uncle. The appearance of Yun Town is not much different from when I left. It is surrounded by mountains on all sides, backed by a water source, and has fertile soil, making it the most suitable for establishing an agricultural base. I went to the bank to withdraw the dowry my mother saved for me, and with the remaining money after buying food, I could buy a piece of land. Behind Yun Town is a big mountain. The young people have all gone out to work, and the elderly rarely go out to the fields, so a large area here is left uncultivated. When I proposed to buy land, the villagers readily agreed. I hired some uncles again to dig out water channels and wells in the mountains, and it took 3 months. The water source problem is considered solved. I went home, put some food at home, and then returned to City K. In the apocalypse, having only food and resources is fundamentally not enough to survive. In my past life, I have seen too many people kill each other over a bun, and those who possessed resources were targeted. Human hearts are hard to gauge. You can never know if what stands before you is a person or a ghost. So, I came to meet Zhou Ting's appointment. I need to train myself well before the apocalypse arrives, to have enough ability to protect my things. 9.8 rings, the accuracy is good. I took off my goggles and turned my head to Zhou Ting. This gun is too light. He raised an eyebrow, lifted his hand, and fired a shot, hitting the bullseye. This model is sufficient for you. I tapped his shoulder with the gun barrel. Watch out. He stepped back. Bang bang bang. 10 targets. All hit right in the bullseye, with shavings flying everywhere. I turned around and aimed the gun at him. How about it? His usually half-closed eyes rarely opened. The narrow Danfang eyes were distinctly black and white. This face clearly looked cold and unapproachable, yet the corners of his mouth always carried a hint of a smile. You said, how could a young lady like you understand so much? Having died once, you will learn more through experience. In my previous life, I protected Lin Cancan and Wang Yin while they fled. I threw stones at zombies, used a slingshot, and fought. I've done it all. Zhou Ting looked at me and said, I'm starting to believe your nonsense more and more. Let it be nonsense. After all, you bought it for $1 million. He lowered his head and chuckled. My marksmanship was taught by an old man. If you want to learn, you better think it through. Zhou Ting was very serious. Once you step into my circle, don't think about getting out. It will be very painful and exhausting. Devil training. Sought but unattainable. He curled his lips. You don't need to go back to the Lin family. Starting today, you will undergo practical training limited to your 1-year prophecy. Welcome to the new world, little wild person. Zhou Ting speaks with great authority, and since the training began, there hasn't been a single day of slack. During this time with him, I increasingly understand why he was able to carve out a pure land in a chaotic world in his past life. Because he is truly born to be a king. As I fell to the ground, I couldn't help but let out a muffled sound, raising my eyes to see that Zhou Ting had drawn another stroke on the wall. The entire wall is densely filled with the character, Xing, you lost again. I stared at the bruise on his face, nodded slightly, and drew a line on another wall. You're not bad either. You've been beaten into a pig's head. He wanted to laugh, but the injury at the corner of his mouth pulled, and with a swipe of his finger, he lightly clicked his tongue. Is it better than a gun at night? I picked up the backpack on the ground and slung it over my shoulder. No, we should head back. I raised my hand to block the scorching sun. The earth cracked from the heat, and waves of hot air surged one after another, making it hard to breathe. The weather is getting worse, so make plans early after you return. Shou Ting reached out to poke me, and I instinctively dodged. He paused for a second and smiled. Experts say this is just a normal phenomenon caused by environmental pollution. Instead of worrying about when the end of the world will come, it's better to think about how to improve the environment. I shrugged my shoulders and said, I don't know who has slowly moved the family's origins to the northwest this year. I heard they even stockpiled dozens of warehouses of supplies. That's nonsense, he said as he shouldered his bag. It's clearly over 100 warehouses, I scoffed. This guy really wasted the Yama title that was sent to him from outside. Shou Ting asked me to go to the northwest with him, but I refused. It is good to have someone to protect you, but I prefer to take my safety into my own hands. I came to Qingqing alone, rented an apartment, and explored with my last bit of time. July 14th in the evening, I sit in the apartment, a knife beside me, my eyes fixed on the clock on the wall. The pointer turned slowly, appearing eerie and urgent in the quiet night. 10, 9, 8, 3, 2, 1, ding. At exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, all the appliances in the house suddenly stopped working as if they had received some kind of signal. Without the air conditioning, the room quickly became stuffy, and the air was so thin that it seemed to silently take everyone away in their sleep. I took out the oxygen tank that I had prepared early and put it on. This process lasted about 15 minutes. After that thin pressure disappeared, the air became quieter, even the chirping of insects and the singing of birds vanished. The world pressed the pause button. I threw away the oxygen tank, took out my down jacket and put it on, and as I zipped it up, the wild wind howled outside. The sky was bombarded with large chunks of hail, and the cars in the neighborhood simultaneously sounded their alarms and the sound of breaking glass. The bustling sounds of people came from outside, and it was unclear which household had opened the window, followed by a scream. The scream seemed to have opened the shackles, and someone in the apartment building shouted, "Monster," while others cried for help. Outside, it is unknown when the wind and snow began to rage. The temperature dropped sharply, and even the guardrails were covered with a thick layer of ice. In the community parking lot and along the streets, a number of eerie figures gathered, neither looking human nor ghostly. They growled softly, their eyes red and lifeless, and their movements were somewhat sluggish. These are the early first batch of zombies, not very strong and without consciousness, but processes of mutation like today will occur again in the future, and with each evolution, the surviving zombies will eventually develop consciousness and even supernatural abilities. I send a message in the owner group. The apocalypse has come, many people have turned into zombies, but some have evolved with special abilities. You can try to concentrate and see if you have evolved. If you see someone nearby with red eyes and stiff limbs, do not approach them. They are zombies and are no longer your loved ones. Someone quickly replied, "What are you alarmist about? Be careful, or I'll call the police and have you arrested." "Well, you just moved in, right? The little girl seems nice. Why does she have such a bad attitude? Have you watched too many movies, little girl?" I let out a cold laugh, threw my phone aside, grabbed a knife, and walked out of the community. Now there is no absolutely safe place in the world. I can only create peace for myself. Shou Ting still had a hint of doubt about my words until the end, and he didn't give me a gun at all. But at times like this, without powerful weapons, even a strong body can get hurt, so I had no choice but to go get it myself. Many zombies have already wandered into the community, but these low-level zombies do not pose a threat. They were killed by me with a single slash before they even got close. Screams kept coming from upstairs. They pointed at me and shouted, "Murderer," and some family members mutated, slowly being assimilated amidst the cries, "Help, help, my life." A boy turned back and reached out his hand to me in fear. I walked over quickly and grabbed him. "Hurry." "Ah." He pushed me back and stumbled forward. I first chopped off the zombie hand that grabbed me, then turned the knife, and the skull of the zombie behind me rolled out, leaving a trail of blood. At the end of the bloodstain, The boy stared wide-eyed as he fell under the mouth of another zombie. I wiped the blood that had splashed on my face and walked outside. No longer paying attention to the cries for help coming one after another from the residential building. I am not a deity. I can't save everyone. On the contrary, I am a selfish person, and I also want to live. Near Qingqing Forest, there is a very confidential military supply. During the last life when the zombie outbreak occurred, the people here couldn't withstand the attacks from their mutated comrades, and almost the entire army was wiped out at that time. The signal tower was still operational, and news was reported on mobile phones every day. However, the whole world lost power, and the phone didn't last long either. In the end, everyone lost contact, living cautiously in a chaotic world. The first batch of zombies moved slowly, and I didn't encounter any tricky problems on my way here. When I arrived, I found that all the people had indeed been bitten to death. I picked up the gun next to the corpse and carefully hid it behind the big tree. Soon I saw a zombie crawling on the ground, gnawing on the entrails of its companion. The air was filled with a violent smell, the ground was covered in blood, disgusting and frightening. The zombies here were professionally trained in their previous lives, and their speed and abilities are much stronger than usual. If I shoot, it might attract other zombies, so I tucked the gun into my pants and slowly approached with a knife. The zombies on the ground didn't notice my approach and continued stuffing chunks of meat into their mouths. I raised my knife and struck down fiercely. I didn't expect this guy to be so stubborn, mechanically turning his head to look at me, opening a stinking mouth and growling. I struck again, and his head rolled in the mud for 2 circles, as if he hadn't realized he had moved, his eyes glistening white, baring his teeth at me. A strong wind rushed from behind me. I sidestepped to avoid it and squinted at the disturbed zombies approaching step by step. I let out a tisk, drew my gun from my waist, and without hesitation shot them in the head. I picked up the remaining guns on the ground and stepped over the bodies to a warehouse outside. Kicking open the door, I reached out and gently slid my hand across the shelf of supplies, and the items on it instantly vanished into thin air. Suddenly I heard a soft call. I turned around and aimed the gun at the unexpected guest outside the door. He slowly raised his hand. "Don't shoot, don't shoot." Seeing his appearance, my heart trembled. The person outside the door is about 185 meters tall, wearing a black hooded sweatshirt, with a pale complexion and trying hard to maintain a smile. Their ears are gently trembling, and the antlers beside their ears are standing straight up. Their skin is also different from that of a normal person, with some spots on their neck that look like those of a spotted deer. This is an orc. In the previous life, there were also beast men, but their numbers were extremely rare, as they happened to be near mutated animals at the onset of the apocalypse and were also undergoing mutation themselves. When the two conditions were perfectly aligned, they would evolve into beast men, but this probability is very low. The entire process is also more dangerous than general evolution. Those with good luck will eventually become orcs, while those with bad luck will only die. I squinted my eyes, keeping the gun pointed in that direction. The air was eerily quiet, and I could even hear him swallow. I pointed in his direction, my finger resting on the gun, gently pulling the trigger. When the gunshot rang out, the orc almost simultaneously closed his eyes. A spray of blood splattered on his face, and his eyelashes trembled slightly, shaking off the blood droplets on them. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes. The terror in his eyes slowly spread across his entire face, and beside him lay a zombie. The blood from just now belonged to this zombie. I put away my gun and walked over. He patted his chest, let out a long breath, then suddenly grabbed me, his eyes filled with tears. "Are you a deity?" I awkwardly pulled my hand away, and this guy immediately wrapped around it again. "My name is Lu Yao, and I am a forest ranger. I was saving an injured sika deer, and I don't know what happened, but I fainted. When I woke up, I had become like this." I lightly replied, "You've mutated into a beast man." His eyes widened in shock, and he was about to cry immediately. I frowned, and he bit his lip to hold back his tears. "It's not safe here. I have things to do. Take these and head northwest." I took out some supplies and handed them to him. The northwest direction is the base camp of the Zhou Ting Alliance, if he can survive to get there. He basically has no worries about his life. He stared at the thing that appeared out of nowhere in my hand. You really are a fairy, aren't you? I stuffed the things to him and walked forward on my own. I know where the thing you are looking for is. I turned back. He scratched his ear, and his bright big eyes shone in the night. Are you looking for bullets and a gun? I'll take you there. After a lot of twists and turns, we arrived at a basement. After much effort to open the door, I snapped my fingers and made everything inside disappear. Watching me use my supernatural ability, Lu Yao immediately became starry-eyed, pointing at my hand and this room, speaking incoherently. Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but chuckle lightly, feeling inexplicably relaxed. This is a superpower, and you probably have it too. Orcs are like the darlings of heaven. Most of them evolve special abilities and are well adapted to the apocalyptic environment. For example, when I was still wrapped in a thick coat, Lu Yao could just wear a sweatshirt. As soon as I finished speaking, he imitated me and opened his hands to exert force. A blinding white light flashed by, and I grabbed his collar and ran. Just as we reached the door, a loud bang sounded behind us, and my ears were painfully shocked. I brushed off the dirt on my body, and the smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air. While a mushroom cloud floated above, I instinctively dodged when Lu Yao reached out. And he pouted aggrievedly, "I'm sorry," then gently brushed off the mud from my head. This stunningly beautiful face is stained with some mud, giving it a sense of broken beauty. I secretly sighed. So your ability is... He cautiously extended a finger. A strand of white and blue lightning entwined around him, crackling. Looking back, I saw that his gaze had changed. What luck does this guy have? Successfully evolving is one thing, but also gaining the rare lightning ability. Don't let others know, I said halfway, waving my hand. Forget it. Your ability is so strong that even if you are discovered, it will be others who suffer. What will happen if others find out about your supernatural abilities? Spatial abilities also belong to a relatively rare category, and as one's strength grows, the amount of things that can be stored will also increase, which is undoubtedly something everyone desires in the apocalypse. This secret is known even to Zhou Ting. I looked at him faintly and raised the gun in my hand. That person will die. Then, will I die? Can you say it out loud? He shook his head like a rattle drum, and even the flesh on his head swayed back and forth. I couldn't help but reach out and give it a rub. The touch feels really good. Then his ears visibly turned red, so red that the blood vessels inside could be seen. I played a note, and he covered his ears and screamed. I chuckled softly. The strong wind has stopped, and the snow has also ceased. The first wave of mutations has ended. It is clearly July, yet everywhere is wrapped in silver, cold to the bone, and at a glance, it is a scene of devastation. Immortal, where are you going next? Can I follow you? He then added, I found the bullet for you. I'm a contributor. You almost blew me up too. He stopped talking, and even his ears drooped down. I brushed the snow off my body and turned to leave. Lin Chi-Chi, the person behind, paused for a second, then caught up and chirped in my ear. Is that your name? Can I call you Chi-Chi? Where are we going now? Is it already occupied by zombies outside? Do you have... Shut up. Oh. I traveled east with Lu Yao, picked up a car halfway, and soon arrived at Yun Town. This place is simply like two different places compared to when I came last time. The beautiful fields are in disarray, the soil is stained with blood red, and there are both human corpses and zombies in the ground. They called out to come over. I raised my hand and fired a few shots, following the scattered bodies and limbs into the town. The tips of her slightly curled eyelashes were dusted with tiny snowflakes, and she carefully tugged at my sleeve. I adjusted my clothes and said, let's go. The once lively and warm streets of the town were empty, and a faint smell of blood lingered in the biting air. Several broken-down cars were parked on the street, and there were corpses inside. It is estimated that they wanted to escape by car but ended up being bitten to death. We encountered quite a few zombies along the way, and Lu Yao always held on to my clothes, hiding beside me, wasting his powerful abilities. I raised my gun and shot one zombie in the head after another, when suddenly I saw a faint yellow light coming from the head of the fallen zombie. Stay here and don't move. If you're scared, find a place to hide. I jumped onto a car and kicked at the zombie with one leg. Was avoided. They are no longer just mechanically numb biters, but will start to resist, and their speed has greatly increased. I drew the knife from my waist and leaped down to stab it into the zombie's throat. It reached out its hands to grab me, but I held the knife handle and pulled back, tearing open its head. Sure enough, there lay a small yellow crystal core inside. This indicates that this zombie has undergone a second mutation. The deer raised my hand. And I don't know where it got a cloth from, gently wiping the bloodstains for me. It was too dangerous just now. Why didn't you use the gun? I withdrew my hand. He has a crystal core in his head. This thing will have great significance in the future. Shooting it will just break it. He looked at me disapprovingly with a furrowed brow, and I raised an eyebrow, my eyes reflecting my own determination. Finally, he sighed and muttered softly. It seems I need to practice my abilities well from now on. I walked to the entrance of a small shop and kicked the roll-up door. Stop hiding, this isn't a solution. Come out and help me clean up the bodies, or the people who get bitten are likely to turn into zombies. A dustpan shook and finally revealed a pair of eyes from underneath, which glanced at me and then shrank back. I let out a tisk and directly flipped the dustpan, pulling out the person underneath. Don't bite me. The person covered their eyes with their hand, and the phone and stand next to them fell to the ground with a thud. It looks like he is doing a live broadcast. He trembled and moved one hand away, and when he saw my eyes light up, he opened his hand. Great God, ah. Liu Yao didn't know when he stood beside me, tapped the outstretched hand of this person, and a flash of white electric light passed by. The look in the eyes of the person on the ground towards Liu Yao changed from shock to fear. I thought he was only scared because it was his first time seeing an orc form. I rested one hand on Liu Yao's shoulder, and he turned back to smile at me. Sister Chi. I don't know why I always feel that Liu Yao is a bit strange. As if they have just become a different person. Abilities can be used against enemies, but not against one's own kind. He paused his smile and said, Got it. I turned to the person on the ground and said, Are you a local? He nodded slightly, but his eyes were always on Liu Yao. I protected Liu Yao behind me. What is your name, Lamb? Do you know how many survivors are still here? We know that we have been hiding in the town for a long time. And there are probably more than 20 people still alive. Are they safe? The lamb shook its head. I don't know. I also saw them when I was running away, but then everyone was just focused on running for themselves. Who still cared about whether others were safe? Then you lead the way. Let's go to the place where you met them and have a look. I'm not going. It's too scary. That thing can bite a person's head off in one bite. I'm right here. Not going anywhere. I frowned and was about to say something when the lamb glanced at me, trembling its lips, almost crying. I'll just go. I looked back and met a pair of doe-like eyes. Liu Yao smiled, revealing 2 small canine teeth. He bent down to pick up the lamb, which shivered and instinctively leaned towards me. Liu Yao smiled at him, and he silently moved a little further away, no longer daring to look up. Is Liu Yao really that scary? Clearly very cute. Let's go. During the process of looking for people, I learned that Yang Zai is a native of Yunjin. After graduating, he ran a small shop and worked part-time in social media, making him a minor internet celebrity. There is no one in the town who doesn't know him. After the outbreak of the zombie virus, he did not undergo any mutations. Simply put, he neither turned into a zombie nor evolved any special abilities. The environment in the end times is harsh. Everywhere wrapped in thick layers of ice, the sky covered with gray clouds. About to fall but not falling, the cold wind carries ice particles drifting everywhere, and the sound of woo-woo howls in my ears. The lamb was shivering all over from the cold, trembling and pointing at a square ahead. Last time I encountered them here, several people were being hugged and bitten by zombies. I estimate not many are still alive. I made a sound of handed him a cotton jacket, and said, I picked this up by the roadside when I just came over. You can borrow it for now. Thank you, Chi, boss. The lamb was getting dressed while glancing over at Liu Yao, always feeling that these two were hiding something from me. There are indeed many bloodstains in the square, and even the icy cold cannot mask the strong smell of blood. The ground is covered with severed limbs, Both Lu Yao and I are used to it, but the lamb has even vomited its bile. Wait here, we'll go in and look. I don't want to go outside. It's all zombies. Lu Yao smiled at him and said, Mr. Yang, the zombies outside have been mostly killed. You're very safe waiting here. Okay. The lamb swallowed nervously, nodded cautiously, and let out a pitiful from its nose, looking at me pleadingly. Let's go together. It's really not safe for him to be alone. Okay, boss. No problem, boss. The lamb ran forward as if escaping, while the deer kept staring at him. What are you looking at? He blinked and said, Why does Sister Chi care about him? I am not concerned about him. I would do the same for anyone. We exist in the end times, and every person alive is a treasure. To fight against those zombies, we must unite. The strength of a group is always greater than that of an individual, so as long as we encounter living people again, will Sister Chi protect them too? There is no one who protects anyone. It is mutual. Lu Yao lowered his head, his voice somewhat cold. I understand. Then let's quickly find the living. Let's find them all. I placed my hand on his head and rubbed it. What's wrong with you? You seem strange ever since the lamb appeared. He laughed so hard that his eyes squinted. Sister Chi, you're overthinking it. Let's go quickly, otherwise Mr. Yang will be bitten by a zombie. The square is very quiet, and there are no people in the surrounding shops, not even any zombies. We groped our way deeper, finding nothing but some bloodstains and charred unidentified objects. The lamb turned pale and said, They can't all be dead, can they? After all, they are childhood friends who grew up together. He called out a few names in the square, and as he shouted, he started to cry. Don't cry, you didn't attract any zombies with such a loud noise just now. At least that's a good sign. Let's go further inside. The further in we went, the more pronounced the burnt smell became, and there was more and more blackened debris. We had already reached the basement of the square, and the sound of water droplets hitting the ground was particularly jarring in the eerie dark room. The temperature in the basement is higher than outside. I reached out my hand to feel it, and at least a normal person wouldn't freeze to death here. Boom, a strong light suddenly hit, followed by a burning sensation on my face. I pulled the two people beside me to dodge the flames. With the fire, the situation in the basement became clear. The flame was emitted from the hands of a middle-aged man, and not far behind him, a group of people gathered, holding knives, clubs, and hoes. Although they were disheveled, their eyes carried a fierce intent. Wow, a force hit my back again, and this time I didn't dodge it. The force hit my back completely, soaking it, and the high water pressure made my internal organs ache. Lu Yao supported me, one hand clenched into a fist, the fist crackling with sound. The person behind exerted another force of water pressure, and Lu Yao reached out. The electric light entwining with the water column, the blue and white light illuminating the person behind. With a scream, a 14 or 15-year-old girl fell down, covering her hand. Lulu, a punch from Lu Yao struck down, illuminating the entire basement with electric light. Also casting a pale face of Lulu. Stop it, dear. I stood in front of Lulu, and Lu Yao's hand stopped half an inch from my face, the residual electricity buzzing and numbing the tip of my nose. I saw a flash of brutality in his eyes. He slowly lowered his hand and tugged at my sleeve. Sister Chi, don't be angry. His eyes were lowered, his eyelashes trembling, and a tear hung on his fair face. My originally probing gaze softened a bit, and I could only look at Lulu's injuries first. Water conducts electricity, and Lulu's arm was severely injured. If I hadn't stopped it in time, Lu Yao really wanted to kill her. Lulu, Uncle Yen. The lamb was frightened and grabbed the middle-aged man's hand to explain. They are not bad people. Uncle Yen snorted coldly, bent down to hold Lulu and returned to the corner, where a woman in a wheelchair sat. With a heart full of pain, she took Lulu in her arms, gently stroking her injured arm, and a gentle glow enveloped her. After a while, her hand surprisingly stopped the bleeding. The woman shook her head at Uncle Yen. The injury is too severe. I can't heal it all at once. After finishing his words, Uncle Yen looked at Lu Yao with an even less friendly gaze. I stood in front of Lu Yao, interrupting his line of sight. Uncle Yen, I am Chi. Do you still remember me? the people in the basement looked up at me, and after a while, the woman who could heal spoke up, "You're Jiang Li's daughter, right? You look just like her." I looked at her and asked uncertainly, "Aunt Jo?" "It's me, your leg." She smiled and said, "There was an accident when I went to support the disaster area, and it was ruined." Her gentle smile overlaps with the blurry face in my memory. At that time, Aunt Jo was the best doctor in Yunjin, optimistic and cheerful, and very kind to everyone. We just heard the lamb outside calling us and thought something had happened to him, but it was a misunderstanding. Since he is a friend of Chi-Chi, he is not a bad person. Lao Yen, don't scare the kids. Sorry, Aunt Jo. I hurt Lulu. Lulu fainted in Aunt Jo's arms. She sighed. This is a poor child. Her father turned into a zombie and bit her mother to death. Then she used her own powers to sigh. After running out, this child stopped talking and rushes forward recklessly when she encounters zombies. The basement was dripping, tick-tock, with water, as Uncle Yan's fire ability melted the ice outside. The slightly damp ground has some bread bags, which should be the food they found. In the corner, there are still some people curled up. It seems that Uncle Yen and Lulu have been protecting them all this time. Aunt Boat, Uncle Yen, those charred things outside when we arrived were the zombies you killed, right? No wonder there are many fewer zombies in Yun Town than outside. Yes, old Yan's fire can instantly burn those zombies to death. But there are too many of them, so we can only hide. Is this the last survivor of Yun Town? I don't know. We just picked them up when we went out to look for food, not knowing how many people are still alive outside. Aunt Boat, hiding here all the time isn't a solution. Are you willing to go out with me to drive the zombies out of Yun Town? Aunt Jo hadn't spoken yet when Uncle Yen pushed me away. It's easy to say, but there are only old people and children here. How can we fight the zombies outside? If you want to die, go die by yourself. Don't drag others down with you. After he finished speaking, the crowd began to whisper. I smiled slightly and said, "You are right, but I never said to let the villagers go fight zombies." He frowned at me. "Uncle Yen, if I'm not mistaken, you haven't eaten for a long time, right?" The people in the basement fell silent, each lowering their heads. "We haven't eaten for a long time. So what? Can going out with you fill our stomachs? The food outside has all been destroyed by zombies. Do you want us to gnaw on human flesh?" My eyes were slightly cold, but I still had a smile on my lips. "I can make sure you all are full. You say it can be done. So it can. Anyone can talk nonsense." Aunt Jo tugged at his sleeve, telling him not to say too much. He turned his head, his voice unwavering. "Am I wrong? Jiang Li just died, and she couldn't wait to follow a rich man. Even the funeral was arranged by the neighbors. Can we trust a wolf in sheep's clothing like her? Who knows what bad intentions she has coming back now?" I paused for a second, then smiled and said, "If you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do, so just go hungry." I tilted my head. "Lu Yao, here I come, Sister Chi-Chi." Lu Yao picked up the plastic bag from the ground and sat down in the corner with me. The plastic bag is filled to the brim with the food I took out in advance, including steaming chicken legs, white rice, and sandwiches with cola. We ate slowly. The dark and damp basement gradually covered by the aroma of the dishes, and apart from the sounds of the two of us eating, there were occasional sounds of swallowing. I held a chicken leg and raised my eyebrows at Uncle Yen. "Little lamb, come over and eat together. I have hot dogs and small cakes here. By the way, do you drink milk tea? There's a big cup here." As soon as the words fell, I felt several gazes looking over. Filled with hunger, the lamb stood next to Aunt Jo, looking at Uncle Yen, who reluctantly glanced at the chicken leg in my hand and waved his hand, saying, "No, it's okay, boss, I'm not hungry." Goo, this is quite awkward. Uncle Yan's face was so gloomy that it seemed like it could drip water. Old Yen, Aunt Jo gave him a glance, and he looked at the person collapsed on the ground, seemingly making up his mind as he pursed his lips and came over. "Is what you just said true?" I put down the chicken leg and clapped my hands. "Which sentence?" He gritted his teeth and said, "We'll listen to you. You make sure everyone is fed." It was originally so. I curled my lips, but now I suddenly don't want to anymore. "You." Uncle Yan's face turned red with anger. and I rested one hand on my knee and propped my chin up with the other, looking at him. He let his hands hang by his side, clenched into fists, then relaxed them after a while, lowering his head. "Miss Lin, I'm sorry. I was too rude just now, please forgive me." I smiled and stood up, giving him a light support. "Uncle Yen, you're being too serious. It's just a small matter, I won't take it to heart." Lu Yao chuckled beside him, and Uncle Yan's gaze at him became even more annoyed, with a deep furrow forming a Chuan character on his forehead. I shook my head helplessly, and he stuck out his tongue. "I put some food at my home, it should be enough for us to last for a while. How much grain can your family store?" I pushed the door open with a bang. And the scene inside successfully silenced everyone. This room is not big, but it is filled inside and out with rice oil and other daily necessities. Where did you get so many things? Don't worry about where these supplies came from. In any case, I won't go back on my word. Uncle Yen was calling people to move things outside. He asked, "What are your plans next?" The ruined small town is littered with bricks, tiles, and electric poles, and blood-stained corpses are everywhere. I pointed at all of this. "Eat well, find others, start over." I settled the sickly villagers and took the people with abilities in the team to search for remaining survivors. After 3 days, we found a few young people again. When they were found, they were resisting zombies. They said there were originally 15 of them, and now only 5 are left. Yuntown is neither too big nor too small, but by the time we find others, many have either been killed or have starved to death from not being able to hold on. This is too inefficient. Sister Chi-Chi, I have a way. Dear Yao winked at me, and a few hours later he took me to the town's broadcasting station. I used to often study some electrical appliances and fix this during my break. He extended a hand, plus my electricity. As soon as he placed his finger on it, the broadcast emitted a harsh electric sound, and a few seconds later, his voice echoed throughout the entire town. "Hello, hello, can you hear me? Hello friends of Yuntown. This is Miss Lin Chi-Chi's home, located at No. 134 Yulin Village. Here, some survivors of Yuntown have gathered. If you hear this broadcast, please come here. We will provide you with the best protection to keep you safe from hunger and cold, but please remember, only move when it is safe to do so. If there are zombie threats around you, please find a way to place a red, noticeable marker at your hiding place. We will come to rescue you." Lu Yao repeatedly spoke without getting tired of it, his clear jawline making his Adam's apple move up and down with his actions. I don't know how long it has been. He lost power and leaned against my shoulder like a rag doll. "Sister Chi-Chi, I'm so tired." I'm still a bit unaccustomed to such a close distance, but looking at his tired eyes that can't open, I pushed his hand away but couldn't bring myself to let go. "How did you come up with that?" He smiled and said, "When looking for someone, I also observe. Broadcasting like this not only makes a sound to attract zombies but also lets everyone know there's a shelter here. Whatever you want to do, I will help you." I lowered my eyes and pressed my lips together. "Lu Yao, I've been wanting to ask, why did you go all out against Lulu that day?" The person on the shoulder paused, the smile fading slightly. He seemed a bit nervous. "Sister Chi-Chi, I'm sorry, I'm afraid she will hurt you." He lowered his head, and I couldn't see the expression in his eyes. "I know that I am different from others. They are all afraid of me and don't want to talk to me. I don't want you to get hurt. I only have you left, don't ignore me." I looked into his watery eyes and finally just sighed. "All right, don't do this anymore." He broke into a smile. Also, Lu Yao, you are no different from others. You are not scary. In the apocalypse, orcs are the darlings of heaven. You shouldn't feel inferior about this. Get along well with everyone, and they will like you." "Got it, Sister Chi-Chi." With the help of the broadcast, it has become much easier for us to find people. And many have also come to us voluntarily. According to statistics, there are currently 167 people in Yuntown, of which 60 have special abilities. We have cleaned up all the zombies in Yunjin, mobilized everyone to clean the streets, and renovated the houses. 3 months later, Yuntown was completely transformed. Originally, the bungalows disappeared, replaced by various bases. People with earth and water abilities were assigned to the vegetable planting base. I distributed the prepared seeds to them and found experienced elders to teach them how to plant. In just 3 months, the base was already lush and green. The medical base led by Aunt Jo has also slowly been established, but the healing type abilities are too rare. In the entire base, only Aunt Jo has such abilities, while the others are people with relevant experience from before. There is also a base specifically dedicated to protecting everyone's safety, where various types of superpowered individuals gather to go out and kill zombies and rescue people. We spread out from Yuntown as the center, rescuing the zombies and people from the surrounding towns. Gradually, we don't even know how the news spread outside, and many people came from afar to join us. The number of people in Yuntown is increasing, and our base is getting bigger. Boss, a group of people has come to the town, saying they are your friends. I paused with the pen in my hand. My friend, a few military vehicles were parked outside the town, filled with people. The man at the front was holding a gun, and the cold wind blew up the scarf beside him. He exuded a carefree and lazy aura from his very bones, but his pair of ruthless eyes was softened by the always upturned corners of his lips, giving him a rogue yet handsome look. I squinted my eyes and rushed forward with a sweeping kick. He bent down to dodge it, casually threw away his gun, and started fighting me. If there were a skilled practitioner present, they would be able to see that my moves and his are very similar. We were locked in a fierce battle, and the people on both sides exchanged glances, gripping their weapons tightly. I was knocked down by him, and he was also hit by me. We fell to the ground, glanced at each other, and laughed out loud. I glanced at Zhou Teng. With his hair cut, he really looks a bit like a warlord from a chaotic era. Zhou Teng stood up, bending slightly at the waist and extending his hand. It's been a year since I last saw you, and your close combat skills have improved quite a bit. I held his hand and borrowed strength. It's all thanks to the master's good teaching. A smooth-talking little liar. The people on both sides saw that our atmosphere had changed and all breathed a sigh of relief. The lamb patted its chest and said, I thought you were enemies coming to settle a score when I saw you two fighting as soon as you met. I chuckled lightly. This is Zhou Teng, my friend. I turned to him and said, why are you here? Isn't your base in the northwest? Zhou Teng rubbed his frozen stiff face and said, sigh, who told Miss Zhou's fame to spread all the way to the northwest? Didn't I come here early to cling to the big shot? I punched him in the chest and said, speak human language. He smiled and said, okay. Okay, about 7 months ago, I saw you online and came over as soon as I finished. 7 months ago, the lamb weakly raised its hand. Boss, it seems that the day you and Brother Deer found me, I was live streaming. It should have been then. I remember now. That day the lamb was holding a phone with a stand. You came all this way. It can't be just to take a look at me, right? Zhou Teng slightly nodded, the corners of her lips lifting. The northwest side is almost settled. I want to take you there. I was taken aback. The lamb's teasing gaze flowed between us, and I clicked my tongue, wanting to hit someone, but as soon as I raised my hand, it was grabbed. The icy touch is even more memorable than the cold wind. Dear youth, Lu Yao held my wrist, but his eyes were always on Zhou Teng. He had a smile on his lips, but his gaze was chillingly cold. Who is this uncle? He has always called me Sister Chi-Chi. Why did he suddenly change how he addresses me today? Also, what the hell is uncle? Although Zhou Teng is a few years older than us, this handsome face can't possibly be called uncle, right? Zhou Teng reached out his hand. Zhou Teng, Xiao Chi-Chi's man. I frowned, and he smiled. Friend, Dear Yao hooked her lips. What a coincidence. I am too. The two looked at each other, both clearly smiling. But the tension was very strong. Okay. As soon as I opened my mouth, Zhou Teng's gaze returned to me. You haven't answered me yet. When are we leaving? I opened my mouth, and a voice came from my side. She won't leave. After saying that, Lu Yao turned to look at me, her eyes shimmering with light. Right, Sister Chi-Chi. Lu Yao seems to have some kind of magic. Every time I look into his unbelievably clean eyes, I can always relax infinitely. Whether she goes or not is not up to you. These two are about to clash again, so I quickly had the lamb take the person inside to rest. Zhou Teng and others, how should I put it? they are my friends, as well as confidants and benefactors. Part of who I am today is thanks to them." Lu Yao looked at me, squinting her eyes. "Got it, Sister Chi. I won't make it difficult for you. I'll go apologize to Mr. Zhou." "No need, you haven't, I'm fine. My sister also hopes that we get along well, right?" I always feel that what he says is a bit strange, and I nodded in a daze. By the time they reacted, Lu Yao was already gone. I looked for them for more than 10 minutes and finally found them at the vegetable base on the back mountain. Lu Yao lay on the ground, the vegetable field beneath him completely destroyed, blood at the corner of his mouth, and a hint of astonishment appeared on the usually lazy face of Zhou Teng. "I know I am an orc and not worthy of Sister Chi. But I just want to stay by her side. I don't want to leave, please." Zhou Ting frowned tightly, and when she saw me, the confusion in her eyes dissipated and turned into mockery. "So you're saying that if I walk hand in hand with Xiao Chi into old age, you can bless us? Well, I agree. You can follow us and see us live happily together." I picked a fruit from the tree and threw it over. "All right, stop teasing him, Sister Chi." Lu Yao turned around, tears shimmering in her big eyes. I helped him up, and he pointed at Zhou Teng and complained, "He hit me." Zhou Teng looked at him, a smile lingering at the corner of his mouth, his eyes deep and inscrutable. I glanced at him and said, "Go back first." On the way, Lu Yao cried to me, saying that Zhou Teng was bullying him because of his strong abilities, and that he was wasting the food that our companions had worked hard to grow, almost directly telling me to hurry up and get this bastard out, in the base office. I sighed and turned to look at him. "Did Zhou Ting really hit you?" He pointed to the wound on his face. "I was hit." I didn't say anything, just looked at him. After a while, he slowly put down his hand, and his eyes darkened. "Don't you trust me?" The traces of the fight in the vegetable base do indeed look like they were caused by ice-type abilities, but with Zhou Ting's strength, the destructive power is far beyond that. If I'm not mistaken, it was Lulu who helped you, right? She used her abilities and then opened the temperature shield. In an ultra-low temperature environment, it's not impossible for water-type abilities to be mistaken for something else. Moreover, from what I know about Zhou Ting, he wouldn't fight you. Lu Yao frowned, his hands hanging at his side tightly clenched into fists, his voice low. "In the end, you just don't trust me. Is that person really that important?" I was stunned by his shout. The brutality in his eyes was once again laid bare before me. It turned out I hadn't been mistaken in the basement last time. "Dear youth," he gently curled the corners of his lips, "Sister Chi, you said before that you wouldn't leave me. If you go back on your word, I will be very angry." The office buzzed with a sound, and Lu Yao was wrapped in electricity. He turned his neck, and his eyes seemed to be covered with a thin mist, making it hard to see clearly, yet it was easy to sink into. I slowly feel my consciousness fading. Lu Yao slowly approaches me, his voice deep, like a feather soaked in water, brushing against my ear. "Take a nap, and everything will be fine when you wake up." He gently tapped his fingertip on my temple, and after a wave of numbness, I blacked out and lost consciousness. I woke up again, lying on a bed in Lu Yao's room. My hands were tightly bound, and an electric net covered the entire bed. As soon as I moved too much, I would get electrocuted. Not to mention the delusion of trying to leave. What does Lu Yao really want to do? I lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the things of these days. Everything is just too coincidental. How would a forest ranger know where the military supplies are stored? Why is it that after being at the base for so long, everyone's first reaction to him is still fear? Also, he seems to really want to. "Miss Lin." Lulu pushed open the door with a pale face, one hand hanging down and bleeding profusely. Her face dirty, tears falling down one by one. "Mr. Dear, he killed someone." I stared at her blankly, gripping the blanket tightly, trembling slightly with anger. "Lulu, move aside." I clenched my fist, feeling the changes of the supernatural power within my body. Before long, one of my hands was flushed with energy, veins bulging, and blood flow accelerating, as if it were about to burst out of my body. So painful. Really, it hurts so much. Forcing this move is indeed still too difficult. The blood slowly stained my clothes red, my fair skin soaked in a seductive crimson. That feeling of being torn apart returned. The images of being devoured by countless zombies constantly assaulted my mind. I fell to the ground, my lips pale. Behind me was that electric fence. Fortunately it was successful. Lulu stood there in a daze, watching me tremble as I was covered in blood, reaching out to help me. I forced a smile at her and said, "Don't be afraid, I'm fine." My spatial ability at the beginner stage can store items, but as the level increases, I can eventually move external objects and even people. If the level is not enough, you will pay a price like mine. Take me to find Lu Yao. The base that everyone worked hard to build outside has been severely damaged, just like during the Zombie City massacre. The smell of blood once again filled the air. Many familiar faces were lying on the ground, some brought by Zhou Ting and some were our own people. I have never been this angry. Grabbed a gun and rushed into the basement. At the door, I heard Lu Yao's almost crazy voice. "Ha ha ha, Mr. Sheep, don't shake. Sister Chi Chi asked me to get along well with you. I won't kill you, at most. I'll take off 2 legs." He lifted the lamb's chin. TSK, but seeing you useless creatures makes me want to crush you. How can we get along well?" He sighed. "Sister Chi Chi said she wants to protect you, but how can she have others by her side? She wants to find the living, so I'll accompany her in the search, turning all of you into the dead, and then she won't have this thought anymore." There are many people in the basement: Uncle Yen, Aunt Zhou, Yang Zai, and Zhou Ting. I saw Zhou Ting looking so disheveled for the first time, covered in blood, with half-closed eyes, and his hands weakly sprawled on the ground. "And you are the most despicable." Lu Yao grabbed Zhou Ting's collar, one hand making a clicking sound. "You actually want to take her away? How can she go with you? No way." Zhou Ting opened his eyelids and glanced at him, smiling, laughing so hard that my shoulders shake uncontrollably. The deer's eyes were filled with a strange red. The antlers shimmered with electric light, and the eyes were once again shrouded in that thin mist. A few zombies slowly walked out of the dim corner, heading in the direction of Lu Yao, and finally stopped beside him. "Sister Chi Chi is right, orcs are the favored ones in the apocalypse. Not only do I have my own abilities, but I have also merged with the abilities of that deer. Coincidentally, this skill can confuse the mind." He said each word clearly. "Control zombies." No wonder that every time I just stare into his eyes, I always give up my principles. Lu Yao directed the zombies to approach Zhou Ting. "Stop it." I raised my gun and pointed it at him, just like the first time we met. Seeing me, the redness in Lu Yao's eyes gradually faded, and the panic on his face flashed by. "Sister Chi Chi, shut up." I let the tears fall, staring at him fiercely. "Let them go." Lu Yao frowned slightly. I turned my gun, and as the gunfire echoed in the basement, a zombie fell. I repeat, let them go. The deer does not speak, and the antlers make a buzzing sound. I continued to shoot, taking out all the remaining zombies, and he didn't even blink the whole time. Finally, I aimed the gun at him. He smiled at me, just like he used to when he was trying to cheer me up. "Sister Chi Chi, don't be angry, I'll listen to you." Then he changed his tone and casually pointed at Zhou Ting, saying, "But this person must die." Zhou Ting struggled to move his hand, and the ice that had just gathered dissipated with his limp hand. He shook his head at me and said, "Go." Deer Yao seemed to be joking, lightly mocking, overestimating oneself. I slowly lowered the gun. "Why? I don't want to either, but you have to go with him. You have to leave me behind, dear." I heard everything," he said, his eyes red. "You are just like them, thinking I'm a burden. They abandoned me in the forest to fend for myself, and now you've brought me out. But you want to abandon me too." He looked at me in tears, with veins bulging on his forehead, like a helpless tyrant. It turns out he had heard my conversation with Zhou Ting before, but I went to the northwest with Zhou Ting just to supply the base with arms. I didn't know this would drive him crazy. Who are they? In the mouth of Lu Yao. What exactly did he go through? "I never thought of leaving you behind after bringing you out, and I've never regretted it, but you did something wrong. And you should be punished. It was me who brought you here. Ultimately it's my fault. We can't fight against you, so punish me instead." I pointed the gun at myself, and Lu Yao's pupils trembled. Don't. He reached out. Sister Chi, don't. We let them go. Don't shoot, dear. I remember telling you before that abilities should not be used against your own kind. But what about you? You killed your companions who were with you day and night. Dear Yao blinked and smiled. But Sister Chi. They are not my kind. From the moment my parents abandoned me, I was no longer human. The day you met me, I wasn't saving any small animals. I was just too hungry. I had just bitten the neck of that deer when the apocalypse began. I looked at him in disbelief, not knowing whether the tears streaming down were from heartache or coldness. Lu Yao stared at me for a while, and he sighed as if he had compromised. Forget it. I said before, as long as you want it, I'll do it. Before he finished speaking, his screams filled the basement, and a stream of blood gushed out from where his arm was connected, with one of his arms lying on the ground. Half of his face was smeared with his own blood, and he laughed maniacally. This murderous hand displeases you, so I'll get rid of it. Everyone in the basement was silent, and I tightly clutched the clothes at my side. Only Lu Yao was still moving her eyes, looking at me with anticipation. He dragged his body towards me, leaving a trail of bloody footprints with each step. Don't be angry anymore. I raised my hand to wipe the blood from his eyes, and his smile, which had just begun to spread, froze because of my cold voice. Roll away. Lu Yao killed many people. Even if I let him stay, the others in Yunjin wouldn't agree, but I also can't bring myself to kill him. I stared into Lu Yao's eyes, my voice echoing in every corner of the basement. Lu Yao has violated the rules of the Yun Town base. Slaughtered companions, destroyed public property, severed an arm, expelled from the base, and can never step within 10 miles of the Yun Town base. I paused, a tear rolling down my cheek. Otherwise, I will die to atone. Lu Yao moved his mouth, but when he saw my tightly clenched fist with my nails embedded in the flesh, blood dripping down drop by drop, he said nothing and lowered his head to accept everything. Lu Yao left, and no one went to see him off that day. I stood on the high tower watching his figure gradually shrink until it disappeared. And Shou's abilities have evolved again. Fortunately, with her around, Shou Ting and Uncle Yan's injuries are not serious. We are once again like at the beginning, cleaning up the wreckage, burying our companions, and rebuilding our home. Are you still not considering coming back to the northwest with me? I shook my head and said, Shou Ting, admit it, you never really believed in me. Did you come this time with a purpose? Shou Ting's previously unyielding smile froze, and he reined in his laughter. His eyes were as cold as ice. He nodded slightly. My principle is to only trust myself and always keep a bit of doubt about others. Is that the reason you didn't choose me? I shook my head again. You are like me, with clear goals, wanting to get what you want by any means necessary. In your heart, I will never be the most important person, precisely because we are too similar. How exhausting it is to spend the rest of my life with someone exactly like myself. I want to take it easy. Shou Ting was staring blankly, not knowing what he was thinking. I chuckled. So, a straightforward transaction is more suitable for us. Come on, what is your real purpose for coming this time? He lit a cigarette, and the swirling smoke made him look even more languid, obscuring his expression. It's easy to establish an organization in the apocalypse, but it's difficult to keep it alive. I'm struggling with the first step, which is to feed my subordinates. The food we stockpiled back when we followed you has almost run out, so I'm here to ask for help. I am not surprised and asked, what is the cost? Shou Ting extinguished the cigarette. The military vehicle I brought is loaded with arms, a barter trade. I curled my lips. Deal, he sneered. Remember to prepare more cigarettes. That was the last one. Damn it, I've never been this poor. We looked at each other and smiled. When leaving, Shou Ting stopped me and said, if I had been completely open with you from the beginning, would we have even had kids by now? You think it's beautiful, don't you? Shou Ting said that no matter how many times it comes again, it will still be the same. He never does anything without benefit and will not be completely open to anyone. Days passed one by one, and in Yun Town, everyone tacitly avoided talking about Lu Yao. As if what happened that day had never occurred, everyone went about their own business in an orderly manner, and smiles gradually appeared on their faces. By the way, The crystal cores found in the heads of zombies became the currency of the apocalypse. After everyone got through the toughest times, they started a new life. They could exchange labor achievements or other contributions for crystal cores, which could be used to buy food, daily necessities, and even for spiritual consumption. Life was gradually getting back on track day by day, and I thought the days would just pass like this, but I didn't expect to meet them again. 2 years after the outbreak of the zombie virus, major alliance bases have gradually been established, among which the Northwest Alliance led by Zhou Tang and the Yuntown base led by me, as well as the Orc zombie kingdom of Liu Yao, which is the strongest, also has a continuous influx of new members. Although these organizations have been established, there are still many people wandering outside, living in fear, and their choice for survival is to join one of these organizations. The 2 people I met are acquaintances. The Lambs said that there are still some zombies left in the new territory of Yuntown, and I led the team to follow them to eliminate them. From a distance, I saw 2 people fighting each other. If I hadn't heard the sound, I wouldn't have believed it at all. It was actually Lin Cancan and Wang Yin. Let go, you worthless person, let go, this is mine, this is what I found. Give me back my eggs, give them back to me. Lin Cancan tightly held onto a broken egg, refusing to let go even as Wang Yin beat her until her head was bloodied. I didn't expect that my words back then would actually come true. A few zombies are wandering around in the back. Wang Yin grabbed her hand, kicked hard, snatched the food, and ran away, while Lin Cancan fell right under the zombies' feet. The zombies have evolved several times now, and they are no longer as slow as they used to be. I raised my gun to shoot, but I couldn't catch up. From a distance, Lin Cancan's screams grew weaker and weaker. The zombie was killed, and the person in its mouth was left with only a breath. I stood in front of Lin Cancan, looking down at her. Her face was ruined, and she looked at me unable to say a word completely. In the end, she stared with wide eyes, gasping for breath, and the tears that slid down the corners of her eyes washed a clean patch of skin on her face. Lin Chi-Chi. Wang Yin was holding the egg that Lin Cancan had exchanged her life for, stumbling over, only to be held in place by a gun pointed at him by someone next to me. He pointed at himself. It's me, Wang Yin, have you forgotten? I curled my lips. How could I forget? I have said that one day I would make you kneel at my feet. He was taken aback and smiled obsequiously. All right, it's just kneeling to you. I'll bow to you. After saying that, he hugged my shoes and slammed them hard on the ground. Please save me. I don't want to be bitten by a zombie. Please save me. It was that bitch Lin Cancan who instigated me to bully you. It has nothing to do with me. I don't want to die. I suddenly felt very sad and let out a cold laugh. Wang Yin, when you pushed me into the zombie horde back then, did you ever think that I was also very scared? He suddenly looked up, his eyes full of confusion. At that time, I also wanted you to save me. But you personally sent me into the mouth of a zombie to be torn apart. Do you know how painful that is? Wang Yin retreated like a devil, and I watched him run without chasing, because a group of zombies came from the opposite side. This place is really similar to where I died before, but this time I don't have to endure that kind of pain anymore. I crouched down. Behind me was Wang Yin's scream. In front of me was Lin Cancan's corpse. I took a piece of clothing to cover her, and waited for the sound behind me to disappear before instructing others to clean up the zombies. The influence of Yuntown has been expanding more and more, and the outside world has discovered a magical thing. The Orc zombie organization adjacent to Yuntown retreats 10 miles whenever Yuntown expands even a little. This unwritten rule has lasted for many years, until Lulu's child can also buy soy sauce. I haven't seen Liu Yao again. He kept our promise very well, Aunt Lin. Why do you always like to stand on the tall tower and sigh? I picked up the little radish head from the ground and took out a lollipop with my bare hands, because Auntie is not happy. Is someone being naughty and making Auntie angry? Then let's not give him any candy. Auntie will have the sweetness herself. After saying that, the little guy stuffed the candy into my mouth. By the way, Auntie, this is what I picked up at the door. I'm giving it to you. In her hand lay a wooden carved deer antler, which was also engraved with a lightning bolt. My mouth is so sweet that it's cloying, but it feels very astringent.